Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the 29th of October 2012, the podcast that got arrested in Chicago for voting twice.
Only because you weren't dead.
This is your host, Shane Killian, and this week as we approach the final days of the presidential election, it's decision-making time. Which one of these jokers are we actually going to waste our time ticking the mark next to? Yes, it's a 2012 presidential election special, and joining me this week once again is Jonathan Loesche, known on the forum as FSBlueApocalypse.
Hello, Shane. Thanks for having me on again. Glad to be back.
So thank you so much for joining me. Now, in the last podcast, and separately on YouTube, I put out a call for supporters of all the presidential candidates that were on the ballot in enough states to get elected to send in their reasons for supporting their candidate. And I was a little disappointed. Most people's reason was something like, because the other guys are terrible. And that just wasn't what I was looking for, so I made sure that people knew I wanted positive reasons to vote for their candidate, not just that the other candidates were even worse than theirs.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the way we're conditioned here in America. It's not about... Look, I'm a big college football guy. If anybody, my team's the Florida State Seminoles, and sadly, it seems like I almost get more joy when the Florida Gators lose than when FSU wins. And sadly, it seems it's almost that same way in politics.
There's so much about our political system that's like sports. It's like people pick teams and then it's, their team, right or wrong, and, they're just waving banners, and that's not really what this is supposed to be about.
Exactly. I mean, this is supposed to be... It's not about the donkey or the elephant or the Lady Liberty or a leaf or an eagle. It's supposed to be about what those symbols represent and the ideas. But unfortunately, like you said, it's gone to Team Blue and Team Red. Yeah, you got people in one stands waving blue and people in one stands waving red, and they're booing each other, and it doesn't get anything done. Well, so we're going to cover the candidates on the ballot in enough states to get 270 electoral votes. And that's enough votes to win. And we'll do it in order of increasing popularity, and they are Virgil Goode, Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, Mitt Romney, and Barack Obama. And I got responses from supporters of everyone except Goode and Romney, so I guess we'll just do the best we can with them. We'll get the information directly from their websites. I wanted to get information from supporters so that we're not straw-manning and just, making up our own easy versions of them to knock down. So I guess their websites will work for that. And if for any other information, at least as Virgil Goode is concerned, you have the third-party presidential debates on YouTube. They're very informative. I learned a lot about Stein, Rocky Anderson, who we're not covering because he is not on the ballot in enough states to win.
Right, he's on the ballot in 15 states.
Yep, and Virgil Goode and Gary Johnson, so...
Yeah, and it was Larry King hosted the Free and Equal Presidential Debate is what it was called. And I've got a link to this in the show notes. All the candidates were invited, including, like I said, Rocky Anderson. They all accepted the invitation except for Obama and Romney.
You can't appear to have the other guys appear on equal footing now.
No.
That just wouldn't be fair.
No, we can't actually come to a real debate where we might be asked hard questions.
Exactly. We have to talk about Big Bird.
Yeah, we can't talk about the NDAA or any of that other stuff.
I think somebody from Reason, I forget who, but they had a running track on their Twitter of various things that were mentioned, like the NDAA, the Patriot Act, and all this other stuff that were mentioned 0 times in all 3 debates.
Right. Well, they had polled an instant runoff vote of who they thought won that debate, and the top 2 would go to another round of debate on October 30th, and that was Gary Johnson and Jill Stein who won those. And Johnson was very much the audience favorite from the start. I mean, as soon as he was introduced last, and he got far more applause than the rest of them did. So that was a Johnson crowd from the start.
Yeah, I think that congrats to all 4 candidates. I thought it was a very entertaining debate.
It was, and it was good. There were actually points of difference, like Virgil Goode was just so different. There was times he took the complete opposite position of all 3 other candidates on the stage, and he did it without hesitation. He did it standing by his principles and his position.
I mean, hey, yeah, I think the Constitution Party is a fairly ironically named party, but hey, I think they got a great spokesman for what they're preaching, and hey, wish them the best of luck.
Well, why don't we start off with Virgil Goode then? And it is Goode. It rhymes with food, not wood.
Although you wouldn't be the first one to mistake him for Foghorn Leghorn.
Well, that's true. I think Foghorn Leghorn would be a better president, though. Foreign policy might not be so good because he always had the good insults going. He'd be honking off all the other countries. Anyway, so Goode was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for Virginia from 1997 to 2009. He was first elected as a Democrat. In 2000, he switched to the Republican Party, and he lost his seat in 2008 to the Democrats. And after that, he joined the Constitution Party, and now he's their constitutional nominee. And I was really disappointed that I didn't get anything from Goode supporters. I mean, if Ron Paul had gotten the nomination, because I was putting this on like the Virgil Goode Facebook page directly to the supporters so they could send it in. Man, if I had done that with any given Ron Paul site or page and Ron Paul had gotten the nomination, I did that there, I would have just been buried in emails.
Yeah, I think Goode, well, like I said, he doesn't have the traction of Ron Paul from running in the Republican Party, and I think what the Republican Party preaches to the mainstream in terms of sort of the social conservatism mixed with strong free market principles, that's the Constitution Party. Take it or leave it, and I think that a lot of, the hawkish foreign policy and not supporting the end of the war on drugs, I think that really turned off a lot of potential Ron Paul converts to Goode.
Well, since we didn't hear anything from the supporters, I thought we'd get some quotes from his train wreck of a website. He really needs a better designer, but his campaign supposedly is all about, quote, emphasizing and following the Constitution. So I've got a few quotes here, so listen to how he emphasizes and follows the Constitution. Illegal immigration must stop. Our borders must be secure. In Congress, I supported and co-sponsored legislation to stop illegal aliens, terrorists, drug smugglers, and other criminals from coming across our southern border. We need to utilize troops, fences, and other measures to stop the invasion from Mexico. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, if by Constitution you mean a proud American tradition of always giving the latest immigrants hell, that's exactly what Virgil Goode stands for.
I was the first to sponsor legislation providing for a fence along the southern border. Yeah, because that's just worked out so wonderfully, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. What are you talking about, Shane?
Well, I'm just thinking of that episode of Penn and Teller's BS show on Showtime. They hired a bunch of illegal immigrants to build a fence just like the one at the border, and then hired them to get through it as quickly as they could. And it was like, 4 or 5 minutes, maybe less, they were through. It just wasn't any. And if you look at the pictures of the border fence along there, you can clearly see just about every step along the way there's some place where they've had to plug another hole that someone's cut through to come into the country.
Exactly. It's a massive waste, and it only all it does really is feed into sort of the xenophobia of where we're going with all this. I think that the people who are coming into this country are subject to all this demonization. What I always enjoy is that the strong sense of irony I get, because they're saying the government's trying to keep people from leaving the country. Well, a giant wall across the Mexican border would be a pretty strong symbolic statement of that.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about things like border guards, and I was a Cold War kid. I grew up, with communism and the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall and all the stuff, how the border guards of the Berlin Wall would shoot you if you left. And I bring that up and say, no, this is just going to be stopping people from coming into the country. Well, once you have the fence, once you have the border guards, do you know all you have to do to go from that situation to a Berlin Wall type situation? All you have to do is say, about face.
Oh, absolutely. The idea that you're going to somehow build a fence that's going to keep all these people who desperately want in the country, how they always say that you can see the Great Wall of China from space? You would actually have to build a structure you could see from space on the Mexican border. And doesn't the Constitution Party preach government spending austerity?
Supposedly. But they also preach, according to Virgil Goode's website, quote, I believe that marriage should be a union between a man and a woman. I am opposed to gay marriages and so-called gay civil unions. I support the Federal Marriage Protection Amendment.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see the relevant part of the Constitution that... Call me crazy. Didn't the guy who wrote it specifically say something about not wanting to mix in religion in the state?
But that was very much a big issue at the time, and it wasn't because, we want to be an atheist society and we want to have naked orgies in the street or anything like that. It's that they understood that if they let government take over religion, that it wouldn't be their religion. And even if it were their religion, government wouldn't do it right. They just mess it up.
Exactly.
And another part says, in the United States House of Representatives, I had a consistent pro-life voting record, and in 2008, the National Right to Life Political Action Committee commended me for your 100% pro-life voting record throughout your 12 years of service in the U.S. House of Representatives. As president, I would continue to oppose abortion and would submit a budget to Congress with zero funding for Planned Parenthood and any other similar entities.
Really, abortion is probably the single biggest dividing issue in terms of where people sort of in the greater libertarian movement, of which you could conceivably maybe kind of sort of throw the Constitution Party in.
Yeah, but that's all the more reason for the government to stay out of it.
I agree, yeah. My whole position is exactly like that. I personally am opposed to taxpayer funding of abortion. I mean, can you think of a more wrenching choice that should be kept within the family and made by family members what's best for them?
I'm content to leave it between the pregnant woman and her doctor and whoever else she decides to use to advise her in that.
Exactly.
My thing is, I oppose funding of Planned Parenthood, not because I don't like Planned Parenthood. It's not, specifically singling out Planned Parenthood. I don't think that's the kind of thing the government should be doing at all. I don't want them funding anything like that, and I'd rather defund all of those things and let us have our money back so that we can decide which of these organizations and projects are more worthy. Maybe I can find an abortion clinic that I like better than Planned Parenthood.
Exactly, and why are they forced into pretty much, if you want to get an abortion in this country, it's Planned Parenthood or good luck.
And Virgil Goode is also a huge drug warrior, and he was pretty emphatic in the Larry King debate. He said, if you want to legalize drugs, don't vote for me. He's for enforcing all the drug laws. He voted against medical marijuana in D.C. He voted for random drug testing. And NORML, that's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, rated him -30 with a hard-on-drug stance.
A negative score. There you go.
Well, I think the way it worked is if you were for legalization, you had a positive score. If you were against legalization, you had a negative score. And
okay, yeah, so I'm sure there's probably at least one or two members of the House that are -90, but I mean, this goes back to what I said before. I mean, Goode is a great candidate to preach the message that the Constitution Party wants to preach.
Yeah, if you just can't let go of your desire to control other people's bodies. But it's like you said earlier, this is the Constitution Party. Now, where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the power to wage the war on drugs or restrict what you put into your own body, to ban abortions or any of the other things they want to do? I mean, it's theocracy.
Oh, absolutely. But again, you slap Constitution on anything and all of a sudden it sounds all nice and patriotic, and hey, they unironically use a soaring bald eagle as their party logo, so.
And usually when a politician goes around doing that, I make the crack about their Bronze Age morality, but I can't even do that here because I have not found anything in the Bible that's against drugs and says to use force to stop people from doing drugs. And I was watching a talk by Aaron Ra, and he pointed out that chapter 5 of Numbers actually requires the abortion of a woman who has cheated on her husband and gotten pregnant with a child that isn't her husband's. So, I mean, where are they getting this from? Who made this up? It's not from the Bible.
But when we outlaw marijuana, that was what, back in...
That was like 1937, I think, was the Marijuana Tax Act.
Okay, yes. There are better people who can put longer rants in about the whole root of racism with drug prohibition. And if you listen to this podcast, you want to listen to just Google history of drug prohibition, and it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, so the bottom line is I think they're misnamed. They're not the Constitution Party. They're the moralistic theocrat party.
Yep, that sounds about right to me. But again, hey, if you're a supporter of Virgil Goode and you're listening to this, and you think Shane and I are completely wrong, and feel free to drop us a comment, and I'm sure we'll make an annotation at some point.
All right, so let's move on to Jill Stein. She's a doctor. She actually has some impressive credentials. She graduated Harvard Medical School in 1979. She was elected as a representative to the town of Lexington, Massachusetts in 2005. She finished first out of 16 candidates. And in 2008, she was re-elected the second of 13 candidates. And now she's the Green Party presidential candidate, and she's been endorsed by many people, including Noam Chomsky and Ralph Nader.
Yeah, that is an impressive set of credentials. And Stein, I have to admit, I think Stein in some of the answers she gave in sort of the third party debate, I thought were almost sadly textbook stereotypical left. Probably one of the comments of the night coming out of that was her, and Rocky Anderson for that matter, pretty much tried to insinuate that college has to be free for everyone. Which
there's no such thing.
Exactly. I think Johnson's retort to that there's a cost to everything. You know, it's just like I said, it just seems like she is so dead set against trying to allow for innovation unless it's in her favorite sectors.
Like green energy.
Exactly. That how could I support a candidate that's not going to allow for as many possible innovations to happen? So
right. Well, why don't we hear from a supporter of Jill Stein? Why don't we hear from Thomas Ricks?
My name is Thomas Ricks. I'm sending this to you today to talk about why I support Jill Stein for president. I'm voting for Jill Stein because she ranks as most important the issues that really are most important. Climate change, political representation, unauthorized detention of American citizens and other encroachments on civil liberties, education, the role of science in government decisions, the use of drone strikes, and the cost of marijuana prohibition. On every issue, Stein has a consistent, rational, progressive stance, having been arrested multiple times protesting against money in politics and poor political representation. Climate change is an existential threat to our species. The NDAA is an existential threat to our freedoms. And Citizens United is an existential threat to our representation, and Dr. Stein does not equivocate in expressing that. In her activism, she has shown herself to be a capable, steadfast leader and a true believer in her causes. I watched the third-party debate hosted by Larry King, and of all the excellent points made by Jill Stein, the best one was actually made by libertarian Gary Johnson, who said, "A wasted vote is a vote for someone you don't believe in." I believe in Jill Stein, and although she won't win the election, she'll win history as being the candidate with the strongest convictions and the clearest and most optimistic vision of the future, with her commitment to science, democracy, peace, and the planet. Thanks so much.
Okay, so that was Thomas Ricks for his reasons for supporting Jill Stein.
Thank you for sending that in, Thomas, and the very well-made points, and we appreciate it.
And there's a lot of stuff that libertarians would agree with Jill Stein. You pretty much think of libertarians and Greens as being on completely different ends, but we agree about the wars in foreign policy. We agree about the war on drugs. There's a lot of common ground there.
And at least on a personal level, Shane, we love science.
Oh, yeah.
Science is awesome. Great issues on things like the National Defense Authorization Act, the Patriot Act. America would be a better place if any one of those four candidates, maybe not good, but that's another day.
Yeah.
But any one of those candidates, I think, would have made America a better place.
Well, if there were no libertarian on the ballot, and Jill Stein was, I'd seriously consider voting for her because I know I've been complaining about people saying that, but she actually is a lot better than either Obama or Romney. And once again, I find myself thinking of how much of a better race this would be with the Libertarian and Green candidates than it is with the Democrat and Republican candidates.
Exactly. I think, Isaac, kudos to Stein on a lot of her issues. I just disagree with this sort of idea that we are guaranteed college, the idea that we have to use government to subsidize green energy. I mean, I said this before, I'll say it again. The last government program I want to see cut is NASA, but I would do it with a heavy heart, but I think it should be done.
There's a few things about her that I just don't understand. One is the Citizens United thing, and she has a lot of experience with the Green Party. She knows what it's like for third parties. The law that Citizens United overturned was devastating for third parties and anyone else challenging incumbents. It was a big slap in the face to free speech. It prevented all sorts of grassroots activity. Since Citizens United was overturned, and then there was another one that was overturned a few months later, I forget the name of the case, but it was the same kind of thing. It allowed more for a grassroots effort for people pooling their resources to go and, people are complaining about the super PACs. Oh, the super PACs are giving all this money to, these incumbent politicians. Yeah, they are, but they're giving like 5 or 6 times as much to challengers and to third-party candidates. So I really don't understand why she could be against Citizens United so much.
Again, I think that the popular phrase in her debate was get money out of politics, which is a very nice way. But then when you want to turn around and say you want complete public funding of elections, then all you're doing is shifting who controls the money from voluntary donations to forced donations from everyone.
Well, and she said, kind of repeated like a mantra, money is not speech. Well, now wait a minute. How do you make your speech heard around the world? I mean, this is a free podcast. I get basically enough donations to break even. So I put it online. I get about 500 listeners a week. Sometimes I get like a couple of thousand, just depends. But it's a consistent 500 minimum. If I wanted to increase my speech, all I have to do is spend money. And I can purchase airtime. I can get my message out. I can get a lot of people to hear what I have to say. And anything that gets in the way of that inhibits my ability to speak.
Exactly. But once again, you throw the magical word of corporations, corporate greed, anything that's seemingly representative of the, sort of the boogeyman of capitalism, and you get most leftists to hate it automatically.
Yeah. And there is one thing that's interesting. She does understand that you can't fix the environment by sacrificing the economy, and she stated on several occasions that in order to improve the environment, you need a growing, vibrant economy. The problem is she doesn't seem to actually understand any economics.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's when you want to impose all these regulations, all these new green standards, all these new things, then all of a sudden you have lots of new costs associated with business, which is either going to force a lot of people to go out of jobs or businesses to close outright.
Well, and how much more information do we need to show that all this thing about throwing money at green energy isn't going to improve green energy? It isn't going to create jobs.
You're saying cilantro isn't providing all the energy needs for your house, and that...
Oh, I wish. I'd love to have solar panels all over my roof and tell this so-called electric co-op to go take a hike. She advocates increasing the minimum wage, which is a very typical Green Party platform piece. But basic economic theory and a mountain of peer-reviewed scientific studies, and she says she likes science, well, here's the scientific studies, showed that the minimum wage doesn't work, and it just results in unemployment for the very low-income workers you're trying to help. And she's also bought into some Bogosity that I debunked a few months ago when Rachel Maddow was talking about the wage gap and how it's all about workplace discrimination and we need equal pay laws. And I'm not going to get into it here. You can go back and listen to that earlier podcast. Just search for Maddow in the Bogosity.podbean.com website. But the basic thing is, it's not workplace discrimination. It's problems that need to be addressed, but they happen long before the job application is filled out. There are inconsistencies and incongruities in education and experience and the kind of things that women are trained and prepared to do, as opposed to what men are. And yes, this is an equality that we need to address, but she's putting it in the wrong place, and all equal pay laws are going to do is kind of paper over a symptom. It's like sticking electrical tape over the check engine light and saying, yeah, now everything's fine. It's not going to give her what she wants.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. The lady who sits next to me at work, 40-something-year-old woman with a master's degree. Me, I'm a 20-something-year-old guy with a bachelor's. We got the same position, same pay as far as I know, but what's the difference? Well, she took a couple of years off to raise her kids, and she wanted to enter the workplace again in more of an entry-level position. Is that, wage discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who takes 2 years off for whatever reason, whether it's to have a kid or travel around the world or whatever, is going to have issues getting back into the job market. You're going to have to get into a more entry-level position at a lower rate of pay.
What's the favorite? Correlation does not equal causation.
Right. Well, any parting shots on Jill Stein?
I said a very strong principled candidate who, again, is carrying the banner well for her party, and I wish her the best of luck going forward.
And then we move on to the Libertarian Party candidate, Gary Johnson.
Which I'm sure any regular listeners are going to be like, okay, these two bozos aren't going to be voting for that guy.
I think we've made it perfectly clear that we're Johnson supporters, which is what I want to do. I mean, anytime you're delivering commentary on the candidates, there's going to be personal biases. You know, you're going to have the people you're for and you're against and the things you're for and you're against. And I really hate it when all these news shows and these pundits pretty like, this is a no-spin zone and we're fair and balanced and we have no bias. Give me a break. You have bias. Just let us know what it is and it'll be fine. Because then we'll know how to interpret the statements that people make and say, okay, well, this is that person's bias, so maybe I ought to interpret it in this way.
Exactly. So, Johnson, former New Mexico governor, jumps to the LP December of last year after running as a Republican. Made his name for vetoing more bills than the other 49 governors at the time. Very strong advocate for, at the very least, legalizing marijuana. That bizarre rant about Whitney Houston and cocaine at the third-party debates withstanding. Strong supporter of ending the war on drugs, bringing the troops home. And to be clear, at least to you and me, I don't think Johnson's the perfect candidate, although he has certainly come a long way from some of his stump speeches earlier, and I think he is clearly the best candidate, and he's a guy who I don't have to vote against. He is a guy who, despite, in the grand scheme, minor differences, he is a guy I can vote for, and a guy that I can rest my head at night voting for.
Yeah, which is not to say we agree with everything. We don't. I mean, the fair tax is a big thing with me. He wants to replace all federal taxes with a 23% consumption tax on all goods, which he says will be revenue neutral. And I don't want it to be revenue neutral. I want to cut. I want to get government smaller. But I guess we got to take care of the deficit first before we can do that. But if you had a consumption tax, even if you get rid of all the other taxes, how do you know they're not coming back? I mean, how many times has the Spanish-American War tax come back?
My whole thing is, if you put a 23% tax on anything, can you imagine the home market with a 23% sales tax?
Yeah.
Or the new car market?
Well, I guess it would make it more visible at the point of sale because, I mean, let's face it, we're paying it anyway. You know, he's pointed this out. If you go to the store and buy a Coke and the Coke's $1, 23 cents of that dollar is various forms of taxes. You know, the corporate income tax and all of the other taxes they have to pay along the way to produce that and get it to market.
Right, and I'm not saying that Johnson is right on that. I'm just saying that it'll slowly but surely be turned back into the monstrosity we know today, so...
Yeah. And the thing that gets me about it is Ron Paul, who was not libertarian enough for my taste in a couple of ways, basically immigration and abortion, had the pure libertarian principled argument, get rid of the income tax and replace it with nothing. We don't need a new tax. We just need to get rid of the taxes that we have. And so you have Ron Paul, a Republican, even though he is a life member of the Libertarian Party, I should say, but, running as a Republican, saying this principled libertarian position on taxes. Then we've got Gary Johnson, our representative for the Libertarian Party, because that's really what the president candidate is. He's the libertarian that everyone sees. And he's talking about this thing that we usually hear about from conservatives in the Republican Party. It's like there's a big switch up there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Johnson is very utilitarian in a lot of his arguments. It's an argument that is designed to sway your average voter.
Which is good. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, so I understand his point of that. And to his credit, Gary Johnson that we saw at the third-party debate was much different from the one from when he started out in the LP.
Yes, it was.
And his lone mention of the fair tax at the third-party debate was the only time he ever drew boos.
Yeah. Well, writing us in support of Gary Johnson is Chien Chandra, all the way from Indonesia. And I had to edit this a little bit. English isn't his first language, so I hope I've edited to make it more clearly and I didn't inadvertently change what he was trying to say. But he says Gary Johnson is, quote, the most fiscal conservative and the most socially liberal person, which I don't really like it personally when people put it that way, because I don't want to define myself in terms of liberals and conservatives. I'm a libertarian. I'd rather define them in my terms. So a liberal is someone who's socially libertarian, and a conservative is someone who's fiscally libertarian. That's how I prefer to see it.
Someone's been listening to Sharon Harris.
Oh, I've been listening to Sharon Harris for years. Big fan of her. Anyway, continuing with Chien Chandra's comments. His tax plans are friendly to the rookie entrepreneur. Many big government supporters don't understand that their regulations, with good intentions, are being used by the big guy to destroy the rookie entrepreneur. For example, the tax code. Socialists want complicated taxes so they can have their favorite social program. But such regulation will become a barrier for small business to compete with the big guy. Socialists love social programs, and they don't want to know the challenge to small businesses. Socialist regulations tend to make the rich get richer because they are the ones who create barriers for small businesses.
That's a pretty solid argument about, like I said, the corporations are the ones who make the regulations, how they are going to be enforced and all that fun stuff. Essentially, all regulations are barriers to entry for small businesses, so I agree absolutely with that comment.
Well, even if the corporations don't stick their lobbyists into things and it's all done purely with the people who want it, every single regulation increases the costs of doing business. And the big corporations can absorb those costs far better than the small businesses can, and there's just no way around that.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So continuing from Chien Chandra, on social liberal issues, liberals think the government should legalize gay marriage. But I think, why should government be allowed to regulate marriage? Solve the marriage problem in society by kicking out government regulation on marriage. And it should be said that Gary Johnson is the only candidate who is pointing out that the Constitution basically says the states don't get to do that. You have the Equal Protection Clause, which says you can't make laws that work differently for some groups than for others. You have the Full Faith and Credit Clause, which says that if a couple is married in another state, or any other kind of legal arrangement, you have to recognize that in your state, because guess what? We're all one country. And you also have Article 1, Section 10, prohibiting the states from interfering in the obligations of contracts. Gary Johnson is the only candidate who realizes that gay marriage is very much a federal issue, and the Constitution very much prohibits the federal government or the states from restricting it.
The argument I always like to make is we could have passed laws in practically every state in this country that define marriage as a man and a woman of the same race, a white man and a white woman, and it's the same flawed ideas cropping up again, just with a different set of circumstances.
And thank you, Chien Chandra, for sending in those comments.
Overall, I think he wants to cut spending by 43%. We won't be drone striking little children. Overall, I think, as he says, the only wasted vote is a vote for the guy who doesn't best represent yourself, and that for me is Gary Johnson.
Because if you vote for anyone else, you're not going to get what you want.
Exactly.
And next we'll cover Mitt Romney, and the supporter who sent in his support for Mitt Romney as a candidate was nobody! No one, not a single supporter. You know, I mean, Virgil Goode, okay, he's kind of a fringe candidate. There aren't that many supporters. I guess it wasn't too far-fetched that we wouldn't get any on him. But on Romney, I know there are lots of people in my friends list on Facebook who are Romney supporters because they keep posting pro-Romney stuff all the time. And again, I went to pro-Romney pages and stuff like that and posted the appeal there. Nothing. No one. What's up with that?
Romney's basic appeal is, my name is not Barack Obama, and I've never been accused of being born in Kenya. That is Mitten's appeal to people.
Yeah. Well, you know, I do want to cover what he stands for. The problem is I'm never sure what he stands for. I don't really trust anything that comes out of his mouth.
He stands for America, Shane. That's all you need to know.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll turn my brain off and go walking in like a zombie and vote for Mitt Romney.
He stands for America. He wants to get that Muslim socialist out of office, and that's all that's good enough.
Well, why don't we take a look at his website then, since no one seems to want to support him. Because he's got this issues page where he talks about things like national defense, and he talks about Obama's failure. And the Obama administration's cuts to the military have left us with 40 to 50-year-old weapons. You know, the average age of our tanker aircraft is 47 years. Strategic bombers are 34 years. And who is he expecting to use all of these tanks and bombers against? I mean, we pay more for our military, or I think it's as much for our military, as all the other nations of the world combined.
Well, I know in all of his ads about... He's talking about cracking down on China.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's attack the people we trade with the most. Yeah, there won't be any economic ramifications of that. Well, he's talking about, I forget exactly how he put it, but, you know, China is doing all these dirty things that, you know, in their trade with us, like they're cheating, which include things like printing money to raise the value of the yuan, to manipulate the exchange rate so that we'll buy more stuff from China, when everyone knows that's what America should be doing. You know, I mean, how many dollars has the Federal Reserve created? How much have they dumped on the exchange markets to try and do the same thing? Basically, all the dirty tricks China's doing, we're doing the same things.
But Shane, it's America. It's different.
Yeah.
What did somebody tell me? Let's get the guy who imposed government healthcare out of there with the only guy beat him to state-run healthcare in the United States.
Yeah. Let's go with the guy who laid all the groundwork for Obamacare.
Yeah.
There's got to be something in here on healthcare. I'm looking down the issues page. National defense, veterans, Israel, Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China and East Asia, Africa, Latin America. I don't see anything in his issues page on healthcare. Imagine that. And I'm looking. I'm going through all the menus and everything.
Judging by that, I heard a lot of foreign policy stuff, and...
Yep. That's pretty much it.
And I'm going to assume all those places include bombs, and more bombs.
Well, we're not going to bomb Israel.
We're just going to give them bombs.
Let's see. To ensure Israel's security, Mitt Romney will work closely with Israel to maintain its strategic military edge. U.S. will work extensively with Turkey and Egypt to shore up the now fraying relationship with Israel that have underpinned peace in the Middle East. Yeah, it pretty much goes on like that, just platitude after platitude.
Oh, well. The Republican Party, everybody. This is your great party of limited government.
Yeah, the party of a global empire. That's limited government for you. Well, and he's got this whole big long Iran page. And he says, a military option to deal with Iran's nuclear weapons program is very real and very credible. And that's actually most of what he talks about. Sanctions to increase pressure on Iran, which never work. All they do is they would harm the people of Iran, but they wouldn't really do anything to the government. Push for greater diplomatic isolation of Iran. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Support the Iranian opposition. He actually criticizes Obama because he didn't support the Green Movement in Iran. You know, and we saw how well, you know, that worked in Egypt and Libya and places like that. But we just need to understand that pretty much all this stuff about Iran is Bogosity. Netanyahu keeps coming out and saying, oh, we've got to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapons program. His own defense minister and his own chief of staff both say Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program and they are not building a bomb. They are using it for nuclear power. All of the reserve uranium that they've used has been used for their nuclear reactors. And then there's that niggling little fact that in the whole history of Iran as a separate country, the total number of countries that they have started a war with, the total number of countries that they have invaded is precisely 0.
Mm-hmm. I loved Romney's comment from the foreign policy debate where he said that the ties between Syria and Iran, how Syria is quote-unquote Iran's path to the sea. I live in the great state of Florida. I think one thing Florida may be known for more than anything else is its beaches. Florida has 600 miles of coastline. Iran has 800 miles of coastline. Just think about that for 2 minutes.
How about a president who is going to be in charge of our foreign policy should know something about foreign geography?
He's just such a terrible candidate.
I know. I mean, I want to find reasons to vote for him. That's what I was saying. People, give me reasons to vote for Mitt Romney. Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think a lot gets made of, the fact that Paul Ryan, I guess, read Atlas Shrugged for 5 minutes, and that's his claim to fame.
Yeah. 5 minutes of Atlas Shrugged is about all I can take, too.
Should we move to the man of the hour?
Oh, I guess so. We've put it off long enough, so let's talk about Barack Obama.
Oh, Barry. Hope and change.
I guess that's what Obama supporters are doing. They hope he's gonna change.
Well, that's the thing, is the place I work at's probably about 80% Democrat, and I spew facts out there, the fact that in his 4 years we've killed more people in the Middle East than Bush did in 8, or the NDA or anything like that. It's just like, either they claim to some self-defense about why that had to happen, or they just blatantly act like it never did.
Yeah, and I've even had exchanges with Derek Colanduno of the Skepticality Podcast. I mean, just in complete denial about it, and I just start posting all these facts, and, you know, he and other people on his page join in the comments. They say, oh, you're doing... They accuse me of doing a Gish Gallop. It's like, what? Posting repeated evidence is a Gish Gallop, and they posted nothing. I mean, you know. I mean, this is a very prominent skeptic doing this. It breaks my heart. It really does. I don't care if he supports Obama. Just stop behaving like that.
Exactly. At least be internally consistent.
I mean, you can say, okay, yes, but in spite of that, I still support Obama for this reason or that reason. That's fine. But just acting like it didn't happen and just belittling the people who are trying to point out to you that, yes, he has killed all these people, he has done drone strikes against children, you know, what do you have to do?
Sadly, American political discourse has gone to the point now where whether or not we should axe Big Bird becomes the main issue of the hour, it seems.
I know.
And Penn Jillette's just absolutely for the win quote was, meanwhile, in Pakistan, we are bombing children, and those children are never going to see Big Bird because they're dead.
Yeah.
It is atrocious, and and we're not even getting into things like the National Defense Authorization Act.
Mm-hmm. Which is something else they try to live in denial about.
They're going to be the last ones to get taken away, but...
Yeah, they'll be Pastor Niemöller.
Well, I was speaking to some school students earlier this year. I said, listen, I grew up in the Bush years. I didn't think we could possibly have a worse president than George Bush. And then Barack Obama came along. I don't know how I can sum it up better than that. I forget who I read it from, but I think they made this great argument regarding the National Defense Authorization Act. Like, Barack Obama could have called a press conference that would have been broadcast on all the major networks, and he could be like, listen, there is this piece of legislation coming down the pike that includes this provision which could potentially allow for the indefinite detention of American citizens without any due process. I will refuse to sign it as long as that provision remains in place. Contact all of your legislatures and demand it to be removed. 90% of the American people would have stood up and applauded that.
I know. But now they use the excuse that, oh, but he had to sign it because we need to fund defense. Now, come on. If he had vetoed that, do you think Congress would have just gone, well, the president vetoed it, I guess we can't pass any funding for the defense? No, of course not. The president vetoes it. They draft another bill that they know he's not going to veto. That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's have someone talking about how good Obama is. Sending us support in writing is Iluvatar003. I'll read out his edited comments here. He's giving us his brother's reasons for supporting Obama, but some of them included reasons why Romney is bad, and again, that's not what I was asking for, so I've cut those out. So here's Iluvatar003. My brother has given me plenty of reasons to vote for Obama while I remain unmoved. But his opinions, which we have discussed at length, might be helpful to your show. Personally, I do not buy them, and have been disillusioned by the debate and the candidates' histories. My brother, a physicist who probably doesn't know what a libertarian is, believed in 2008 that Obama was the candidate of hope. Just after Obama cut the budget for the new moon landing, I asked him how he, of all people, who did nothing but build Saturn V models as a kid, could vote for him. I reminded him about how I had no faith in Obama in 2008, I looked at his voting record, hoping to find a candidate who would undo what Bush did, saw that he voted with him every time, and said no then and there. Which is exactly what I did, if you recall. And I was talking about before the election how, no, Obama's not like that. He's gone with Bush. He's just going to extend everything, and that he's another big government tax borrow and spend warmonger, despite what all the people are saying. And people keep coming up to me, like, how did you know? I just saw this video. How did you know all that? I looked at his record. That's all I did. I just looked at his record. So continuing with his comments, I remain the only black person I know that didn't vote for Obama. He understood my plight, but then gave me these reasons. 1. It is not as important to him that the national debt drop or that we make cuts. It's what we spend the money on and how efficiently. He doubts that people would complain if we spent all $16 trillion on foreign aid, humanitarian activities, science, technology, and education. Well, he doesn't know us very well, does he?
And we are very pro-science people.
Yeah, I mean, try finding people who are more pro-science than us.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the biggest problem with this, all the libertarian arguments aside, the biggest problem with this is that $16 trillion was spent on the backs of the next generation. And for the most part, the people who are going to pay off the bulk of that debt are not old enough to vote and may even not be born yet. And that's taxation without representation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at my generation, I've already given up on the idea I will ever see a dime of my Social Security money.
Right.
Heck, even your generation.
Yeah. But of course, they still take the money from me. Continuing with his comments, he believes in Obamacare and that however corrupt it may be, it can be revised for the better. So all we need to do is just do it the right way.
Yeah, I fail to see how that's a good reason to vote for Obama.
Yeah, because apparently he did it the wrong way before.
That's when we get the real Obama.
Oh, yeah, that's when he pulls off the mask and reveals, yeah. He couldn't oppose Congress. He couldn't do the things he wants to do. He has to support the NDAA and do all these things so he can get reelected. But then once he's reelected, then you'll see the real Obama come out, and he'll be a man of peace, and he'll stop raiding medical marijuana clinics, and he'll start doing all these things he said he was going to do that he wasn't able to do before because he's not going to be worried about being reelected. And I remember very distinctly hearing that in 2004. Because, you know, as much as I complain about Obama now, I was complaining just as much about Bush back then. And people say, well, you know, you need to vote for Bush because he's smaller government. I'm like, what smaller government? He, you know, increased taxes, he increased spending, the deficit's going through the roof. And they said, yeah, but that's because he's had to worry about being reelected. And just you watch, if he gets reelected in 2004, then, you know, he's going to say, haha, I fooled you all, I'm really a small government guy, and start doing all this stuff. And of course he didn't. And I don't see any reason to think that Obama will too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, point number 2. Despite Obama being hopeless and unbearably obsequious to right-wing Christian fundamentalists in Congress, he is a Democrat who is pro-choice and might have a better chance to appoint a Supreme Court justice who will not instantly overturn Roe v. Wade and make abortions legal in another 5-4 decision. Yes, it's the whole we need to get our guy in to appoint the Supreme Court justices thing.
I don't even understand that. I mean, the Supreme Court's already screwed.
Yeah.
I mean, we already saw the fact that we had that 5-4 decision with Obamacare. Do you really think Romney's going to appoint that much better judges over Obama?
Or Obama over Romney? I mean, you've got... They say, oh, well, you know, these liberal judges will vote this way and these conservative judges will vote that way. Yeah, except when they don't. And I think the Supreme Court decisions now are basically flipping a coin.
I mean, that's sort of the attitude, so...
So you know what his next sentence is? He believes now that Obama's second term is secure, he will grow a backbone with Congress and stop accommodating their fundamentalism. What have we been saying?
Yes, the Obama who... Never mind, this is... I give up.
By the way, just so everyone knows, I did not give Jonathan these comments ahead of time. So coming up with this, it's not because he read it and he was going to set up for it. No. This is how predictable it is. Have people forgotten what church Obama went to in Chicago?
Well, it's been more than 5 minutes, so probably yes.
Oh man, it's got to be the wackiest, nuttiest, craziest fundamentalist church in the country, or one of them anyway.
Let's give Sarah Palin's a run for her money.
Alright, point number 3. Romney and Obama seem to agree to make China culpable for its economic wrongdoings, like holding down the currency and making counterfeit digital and physical products. Romney made this case much stronger than oh, by the way, have you seen that video that comes from the ICE about why we need laws against piracy and everything?
I haven't seen that one.
I should put that in the show notes. It's good for a laugh. Yeah. But Romney made this case much stronger than Obama did, which is why my father is voting for Romney. Okay, we've got one reason from a supporter to vote for Romney, but my brother believes that since Obama has made us look better in the world internationally, he'd be better at getting what we need.
Yeah, what do we need from foreign countries?
We need products. We need whatever they can make more cheaply than we can, so we can buy it from them and save money and produce even more here.
But then we might cut down on jobs here at home, Shane.
Well, not if you've studied basically every economist that ever lived. I mean, this goes all the way back to David Ricardo. You know, if someone else can produce something cheaper than you can, you buy from them, and you're both better off. Division of labor.
So, did he make any other points?
He's got 3 more points.
Oh, boy.
4. He agrees with Clinton's idea that since the economy has crashed so badly, Obama's plan can actually fix the economy in the long term. It will take 10 years, not 4 years, though. I believe the president knows nothing about economics. Yeah, and I mean, this whole idea, the economy might take 10 years to recover. Well, isn't it just funny that, you know, at times like 1946 and 1921, when the government kept their freaking hands off the economy, it was like a year. And it was all better.
Or in extreme situations where you essentially see... I mean, Japan is practically still in the lost decade, 3 decades later. Europe's on a... Europe's going to be... You know,
Europe's not going to be Europe.
Exactly. Europe's going to be tribal feudalism. With
Germany and Switzerland as being little oases of...
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to only get worse in 2014 once all of the effects of the healthcare bill come in.
All right, point number 5. He believes Obama has a saner policy in regards to Iran and foreign policy in general. Obama has at least said he would leave Afghanistan in 2014. Yeah, where have we heard that before? And he did, however ineptly, get us out of Iraq in the first term, like he said. Of course, that was, what, a year, 2 years after Bush's original timetable for leaving? And he only did it after the Iraqi government basically threatened to make an international incident out of it.
And didn't we still leave about 10,000 troops, except
15,000.
15,000, yeah. We just scrubbed off their title and put something like peacekeeper or something like that.
Peacekeepers and embassy guards and stuff like that, yeah.
So, yeah, we're government math. 15,000 troops still in Iraq. We left Iraq, by God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he does have the more compassionate plan, though, to deal with Iran. Instead of, launching 100,000 American troops into there, we're just going to keep drone bombing them so that we can just, from 1,000 miles away, anonymously destroy...
Send in the drones. That's his foreign policy.
Exactly. That's it. I mean, and not just foreign policy. Hell, at this point, it's domestic policy, but...
All right, point number 6. This was point number 7, but the original point number 6 was basically because he's not Romney, so I'm not going to do that one. Point number 6, he believes in gay marriage. Despite the fact that Obama has done little to progress this issue, he thinks something will happen for it by 2016, and there is at least a chance of this happening with Obama, especially with that Supreme Court justice. I mean, we've talked about the Supreme Court justice and what he's going to do when he doesn't have to worry about being reelected, but there's basically this big, larger issue. What has ever happened that stopped Obama from doing what he wants? They tried to push the bill on domain seizures through Congress, and it looked like one of those things that were going to pass quietly and quickly, but there was enough of a public outcry from it that it failed. What did Obama do? He passed an executive order, and he started doing it anyway. His jobs bill didn't get passed. He passed the jobs bill in a series of executive orders and did it anyway. And the court said, you can't do the indefinite detentions and all that other stuff with the NDAA. I think it was Eric Holder, or one of them, arguing the case, said, well, the Supreme Court doesn't actually have the authority to do that, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing anyway. If Obama hasn't done something, it's only because he hasn't wanted to. And that's what really gets me about all these Obamatons saying, well, but he couldn't and he wanted to, but Congress wouldn't pass him, and the Republicans wouldn't work for him, and they blocked him. Oh, come on. Every time that's happened and it's something he's wanted to do, he's just passed an executive order and done it anyway.
Yeah, and he only supports it so far as it being a state issue.
Which puts him in line with what the author of the Defense of Marriage Act now believes. Congratulations, Obama, you've made such good progress.
Mm-hmm. So, it just makes me sad knowing that the last two men we discussed are going to get 90-some-odd% of the vote on.
Yeah. And of course, they're going to treat each and every one of those votes as a complete validation of everything they stand for and everything they've argued for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me close out with Iluvatar's comments, just to make it more clear where he stands, because he's been passing on his brother's arguments, but this is his. In my mind, Obama has been Bush's third term, and worst of all, he has made all of his essential failings part of the bipartisan consensus, the Patriot Act, ignoring Congress, etc. I wouldn't vote for Johnson despite his record, because I have never even heard what his plan is going to be. He seems unwilling to even advertise, unlike a candidate like Ross Perot did, or even Ralph Nader. He couldn't even put himself out there well enough to make a difference. Well, probably because he spent so much time having to fight the Republicans in court and spend all that money in, legal action just trying to get on the ballot. But he is running TV commercials. They're just not running anywhere near like Ross Perot was, because Ross Perot was a multi-zillionaire and could just, pay for his own infomercials and do whatever he wanted to. That's how he got popular.
Yeah, exactly. There's a difference between wanting to do things and having the ability to do them.
Yeah, and with all of the campaign finance requirements that put all these restrictions on who can donate and when and how much, it really makes it hard for challengers, especially third parties, to build up much of a war chest. And then from that, you get into all the ballot access fights that take up money and everything else, trying to get in the debates. I would love for Johnson to just blitz the airwaves with commercials the way Ross Perot did, but until he raises $50 million.
Exactly. So.
Well, we do have another quick pro-Obama comment from 216 Trixie, who is voting for Obama because, quote, unemployment has dropped, now below 8%. Wow, I can just hear the sonic boom as the jobs are rushing to be created.
Yeah, and well, it's not so much jobs being created as unemployment. Unemployment people are like, well, you're no longer unemployed.
Yeah, they kind of drop off the rolls after a while. But if you look at the employment rate, you would think if the unemployment rate was 8%, then the employment rate should be 92%, right? Well, no, doesn't work that way. They're actually two different measurements. And the employment rate has not increased. And what that means is that when you consider how many people there are in the country, how much the population has increased, there haven't been as many jobs created to even take care of all of the new people who have just come into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And sales of new single-family homes are up 27% in the last year. I'm from foreclosure unemployment capital of America, Stockton, so these matter here. Which is really more Bernanke than what the president is doing. And I've talked before in the podcast about how that's the bad thing. That's just trying to get the housing bubble going again.
Well, what else can you say? I don't buy that as a reason to vote for Obama.
There seems to be little doubt that Obama is just going to rubber stamp Bernanke for another 4 years. Romney has said that he would replace Bernanke as Fed chair, but he hasn't said who he would replace him with. And if he just ends up replacing him with someone like Glenn Hubbard, we're just still going to be in the same mess.
Yeah, I've heard some people say, like, oh, Greenspan was an Ayn Rand fan. I'm like, but,
yeah, he was this big gold standard guy. He was one of us.
Yeah. I'll see you again in another 4 years. I will probably spend election night sipping away on some fine wine just to numb my brain for a while before settling down for another 4 years before...
Oh, but Jonathan, I just had a psychic prediction. The 2016 election is going to be important. It's going to be the most important election in our lives. It's going to be so important that we can't waste our vote on a third party. We've got to make sure that the Democrat or Republican gets in to stop the other guy, because the stakes are higher than they've ever been. Guess what? I make that prediction every election year, and every election year it comes true.
It's unfortunate. I truly hope the best for Gary Johnson and any of the guys running third party. I hope they get as many votes as possible.
And break through this two-party duopoly.
Exactly. Although I'm encouraged, even like mainstream sites are now starting to use the word duopoly when describing the Republicans and Democrats, so...
Yeah. We're making a lot of progress.
Yeah, but hey guys, at the end of the day, it's all just one big game, and whether we get a Romney presidency or an Obama presidency, a lot of the stuff that's going to happen over the next 4 years is going to happen anyway. You know what I say? Treat it as an extension of Halloween this year.
It's certainly scary enough. My advice, if you're thinking about who to vote for, of course I want you to vote for Gary Johnson, but you can make your own decision. You're an intelligent person. But consider this. Vote for the person that when you wake up the next morning and look in the mirror, you can look at yourself and say, I feel good because I voted for that person.
Yep, and if we had more people who did that, we'd be in a lot less bad shape.
Well, that wraps up this electioneering, engineering, profiteering, racketeering, domineering, power steering, hard of hearing, and cam pipe clearing edition of the Bogosity Podcast. Please visit the forums at Bogosity.tv, where you can read the show notes and join the discussion on these and other subjects. This podcast is free but not free to produce, so please use the donate button at the top of the Bogosity.tv website or down the right-hand side of the podcast page and give generously to keep this podcast going. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, just send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@Bogosity.tv. Put it in an audio file, and if it's good enough, it'll get played right in the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thanks to everyone who sent in their opinions. And thanks, Jonathan Loesche, for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me back on. We need to do this again sometime.
Until next time, here's a quote from H.L. Mencken. Every election is a sort of advanced auction sale of stolen goods. The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license.
Bogosity.
11th Doctor for President.
Do you want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.